I didn't come for ghosts. I came for content. The estate sale was the kind with a handwritten sign and a yard full of warped furniture, everything sun-faded and soft at the edges. An old man with nicotine fingers sat by a cash box and said she was a librarian. Like that explained the stacks of magazines, the crates of Reader's Digest condensed books, the heavy smell of paper and dryer lint. In the back bedroom, on a low shelf, under a folded chenille bedspread, I found a shoebox of VHS tapes with a label I couldn't ignore: Pine Bluff District Behavioral Upgrade. Dates ran from 1983 to 1986. There were other scrawls: PE pilot, assembly, correction, in tidy, aggressive block caps. 5, the old man said. I handed him a 10 and told him to keep the change because I needed the line he'd give me when I lifted the box to the camera later. Found them under a bed off Highway 65. $5, best clickbait I never had to write. Back home, I put the box on my desk and cleared space like I was laying out surgical instruments, USB capture stick, S-video cable, thrift store VCR that smells like hot dust when it spins up. I set the camera on its little tripod to my right, angled so it can see my face and the tapes without picking up the worst of the mess behind me. I hit record and practiced the thumbnail face. Surprise, delight, mild horror. I picked surprise with a tilt of the head to show the jawline. It always does numbers. Hey, friends, I said, and the reds on my audio meter sat perfect, not touching the top. Today we have something wild, the Pine Bluff tapes. I don't know what they are yet. We're going to find out together. I held one up. The handwritten label looked more official in the lens than it did in my hands, the way cameras can make clutter look curated. PE pilot, in blue ink that had bled where a sweaty thumb pressed too long. I smiled without thinking and saw in my preview window that the smile held a half second too long after I stopped meaning it. I told myself that lag came from the cheap HDMI dongle. The VCR choked on the first tape and then settled into a steady whir. The TV flickered to a school gym. Polished wood, folded bleachers, the word Panthers drooping on a water-stained banner. A PE teacher paced with a clipboard and a silver metronome on a stool, flicking it with his finger like he wanted it to behave. He clapped on the beat. Tick. 5th graders stood in neat rows wearing something I didn't recognize at first. A ring of metal at the base of the neck, like a backward stethoscope. The ring clasped at the back with a tiny brass latch. Every time a kid scratched at a wrist or blinked too long, the teacher made a mark. An aide moved down the line, lifted a chin with 2 fingers, whispered, and the kid's smile came back, tight, practiced, quick. I paused to breathe and then rewound to make sure those weren't costume pieces. They weren't. On the far wall behind the teacher, crooked on a nail, a poster read, "Upgrade, be a better self." A panther cartoon flashed a thumbs up. The corners of the paper curled inward like they wanted out. I told the camera what I knew. Pine Bluff, Arkansas, paper mill town, population boom, population slide, the usual hollowing out. Rumor had it an entire neighborhood had been bought by the county for redevelopment and then just left to rot. I said we'd go tomorrow and check the school if it was still standing, because places that forget people tend to forget to lock doors too. My voice came out bigger than usual in the tiny room, resonant, like the mic gain walked itself up while I wasn't looking. When I played the tape back in the editor, a faint metronome lived under my voice. Tick under the T's and K's, a soft talk in the rests. Old tape artifacts I wrote in the notes doc. add to vibe, I slid in another tape. Assembly, Harlan intro. Now a microphone on a stand, a woman at a podium. Mid-40s, hair like a PTA president you'd instinctively apologize to, the kind of smile you want to live up to. We teach reading and math, she said, and how to be good. What if how to be good could be taught like long division? Polite laughter from parents at the back. In the first row, a girl with an overgrown cowlick stared past the podium at a dot on the gym wall, her eyes trying to fix on it and failing. Dr. Harlan, because she had Dr. Energy even if the tape didn't put her name on screen yet, raised a hand and the metronome settled the room into a breathing animal. I paused and realized my jaw ached. I'd been clenching without noticing. My molars fit together perfectly like a zipper closing. That never happened to me. My bite is crooked in a way my dentist calls character. I tried to crack it loose. It slid back into that neat track. I wrote it off as stress and the way old footage crawls into your head. I recorded a couple of cutaways, me holding up the box, me cracking a low-grade joke about YouTubers dying for content. The comments would line up to say, "He called it," and they'd be wrong, but it would keep people watching to the end. I siphoned the first 20 minutes of each tape to MP4, labeled the bins like I actually had an assistant: Pine Bluff 01 Gym, 02 Assembly, 03 Correction, and left the VCR on pause while I took 2 ibuprofen for the jaw. At midnight, I forced myself to stop. If I let myself, I'll edit until sunrise and upload twice as much as anyone asked for. I set the video thumbnail, a freeze frame of the collars, and the line "Upgrade, be your better self" peeking over the kids' heads. I typed a title: The Town That Erased Itself. Pine Bluff Tapes. Do not watch alone. I laughed at my own clickbait. I always do. I scheduled the upload of a teaser for tomorrow at 2000 hours after I'd have daylight footage of the school to cut in. I killed the lights, but the room didn't feel dark. The edges seemed clean, like someone had relabeled the world, and I finally agreed with the categories. I lay on the couch because the desk chair makes my back ring like a tuning fork after too many hours. The old VCR ticked as it cooled. I counted breaths without meaning to. In 2, hold 2, out 2, hold 2, like I've been practicing for a test. At 10, I hit 20. At 20, I slid past 30 and only noticed because my mouth was keeping time even as my head drifted. I dreamed the gym. In the dream, the collars were heavier and more beautiful, lacquered like old toys. The PE teacher turned and had my face, but cleaner. The asymmetries filed off. A subtle, camera-friendly angle set in the jaw. He held up a clipboard with my channel name scrawled in the margins and tapped the metronome with the edge. Tick. The rows of kids smiled in unison. Their lips shook and then held. I woke at 6 o'clock on the dot. My alarm was set for 7:30. I blinked into the gray and felt awake in a way that wasn't rested, but was organized. In the bathroom mirror, my posture looked like a posture tracker ad. Shoulders level, head centered. My lower canines felt sharper, but when I checked, the gum line was just neat. I told myself I was imagining things because I've been staring at other people's mouths on VHS for hours. I smiled to see what the camera would get. The smile was fine. It didn't drop when I told it to. I counted to 3, and then it dropped, obedient, a beat behind. Breakfast was coffee and a protein bar choked down in 3 even bites. The metronome that wasn't there ticked at the edge of hearing. It was a refrigerator cycling, a pipe, a neighbor's steps, anything but a metronome. I packed the camera, The LED, the capture stick, the extension cord, extra batteries, the hand torch, the multi-tool, a cheap pry bar. I wrote on a post-it, shoot B-roll, sign, hall, Jim, AV. I wrote DRHARLAN and underlined it. Before I left, I watched the correction tape again, the one I'd promised myself I'd save for later. A boy in a small room, the dot on the wall at eye level. "Eyes on Dot," said a voice through a tinny speaker. "Smile." The collar clicked at the back of his neck, a sound that landed in my own skull as a bright penny drop. He flinched, then smoothed. "Say, I can wait." He said it. The second time, his left eyelid hesitated and then sinked to the right. The third time, the corners of his mouth locked at a new angle, like they had found the groove meant for them. "Good," said the voice. "You're being your better self." The boy's fingers left crescents crushed into the chair arms. When he stood, you could see them, half moons in soft pine darkened by sweat. I backed the tape up and watched the brass teeth on the collar bite light. The ache in my jaw returned, not a throb, a workmanlike burn. Something behind the gums shifted, with the confidence of a plan followed. "Placebo," I wrote in the video notes. Powerful. The room smelled like warmed plastic and old carpet. My refrigerator hummed at exactly 12 minutes past the hour. It always does that. And the comments always complain about the fan noise. I thought about throwing a blanket over it when I recorded the debrief later. I thought about the title card font, whether I should update it. I put the tapes back in the shoebox, then took them out again and slid one, the unlabeled black shell, into my backpack, because sometimes mystery plays better on camera when you reveal it on location. The sky outside my window was the color of aluminum. I locked the door, then unlocked it and checked the knob, because that's who I am on road trip mornings. I set a travel mug of coffee on the roof while I loaded the case and the tripod. When I slid into the driver's seat, a small fleck of brass fell out of my cuff and glinted in the cup holder. I picked it up. It was nothing, paint fleck, foil from a candy wrapper, something, but it had teeth on one edge the way a seam ripper does. I flicked it to the floor mat and told myself not to be dramatic. I typed Pine Bluff High School into my Maps app, and it offered an address with a gray pin, no rating, no photos. The route was 2 hours with no traffic. I put the car in drive and listened to my tires roll over the expansion joints of the garage ramp. Tick-tock, tick-tock, like an old tape spool nudging itself toward play. I touched my jaw to loosen it and felt it slide into place with a satisfying click, like a tool seating in a socket. It made me want to smile, even though there was no one to see it. "Let's go find a better self," I said, because the line would cut nicely before the first roadside shot, and my mouth liked the way the words lined up. Soft consonants, no snags. The camera on the passenger seat watched me in its dead black eye. I turned onto the boulevard, merged onto the highway, and the city fell away in ordered pieces. Pine Bluff waited somewhere ahead, under kudzu and red brick and static. I didn't press play. Play was already pressed. Pine Bluff didn't look abandoned so much as paused mid-blink. The neighborhoods on the way in were a mouth with teeth missing. One house flattened to a rectangle of concrete, the next still standing but bowed at the spine. A late model sedan frozen in tall grass like a toy left out in the rain. The school sat at the end of an access road gone to gravel and weeds. Bruce R. Thomas Middle, letters ghosted on the brick. Kudzu had taken the chain link like a dare and won. My camera rode my shoulder. The LED lived in my pocket until I needed it. I said the line I'd rehearsed in the car, clean and calm. We're here to see what they taught people to forget. The front doors were chained with a cheap aluminum lock that felt good between my palms. The pry bar handled it with two neat pops. The lobby air had the paper and old rain flavor of mold that's lost its appetite. Trophy case shattered. Posters curling. Behind the office glass, a field trip sign-up sheet still clipped to a corkboard. State Fair, upgrade testing suspended. See Dr. Harlan. A cougar mascot gave a thumbs up with a paw. I filmed close on the thumb and then pulled back to get the empty desk, the dead phone, the perfect layer of dust that makes you want to write your name and decides against it. I followed the smell of varnish and rubber to the gym. The floor had buckled into a slow wave and cracked into fish scales where rain had found a way in. The bleachers were pushed in. A water-stained banner sagged, Panthers. At center court, a stool stood where a metronome used to be, metal skid marks tracing a habit. I set the tripod, framed the wide shot, then moved slow. The lens likes reverence. This is where the assembly happened, I told the room and the future viewers, where someone said you could learn goodness like long division. A storage cage off the far wall held mats, practice baseball tees, a box of mildewed pennants, and 3 aluminum arcs I recognized too late. The collars were light in the hand and heavier the instant they closed a loop. Up close, they were neatly made, lacquered dial at the back, 2 brass teeth on the clasp, an enamel dot marking a setting. I filmed them in my palm, the way the light caught the bevels. Do not do this, I told the audience, so I could do it in their place. I lifted one to my neck. The metal was cold enough to feel like a fact. The clasp found itself with a precise click. A pressure, not pain, like a stiff shirt collar insisting. I looked at the camera, at myself inside the frame, and watched my shoulders square as if someone had nudged them. My smile arrived the way a light turns on. I unsnapped the arc. The movement took more effort than the decision. When the teeth let go, they left 2 clean kisses at the base of my skull, as polite as a new pair of shoes. I said, placebo, softly enough that the audio would pick it up if the room was kind. My jaw ached as if it had chewed something tough and found a flavor worth it. I pocketed B-roll of the collars and left them where I found them, because I pretend at a code when it suits the edit. The hall of green lockers led to the AV room, door stickier at the hinges than the lock. Inside, metal shelves bending under the weight of tapes and paper, a cracked rolling cart with a TV strapped to it like it might escape. Ledger books stacked in 3s, their cloth spines labeled in a narrow hand. I filmed the spines, the dust, the fluorescence that buzzed, even though they were dead. When I opened the first ledger, a smell came out of it that made me think of elementary school and winter coats. Pencil shavings, floor polish, the solvent of a certain brand of glue stick. Columns marched, period lengths, student initials, compliance metrics, impulse deferrals, alignment scores. The notes were precise in a way that made me feel imprecise by comparison. On one page, a Polaroid stapled at the corner, a boy in a white t-shirt, collar bright against his skin, eyes locked on a dot outside the frame, smile like a ruler edge. Baseline 0.0 written in Sharpie along the white border. Dr. Lucinda Harlan's name recurred in the margins every 3 or 4 pages. Harlan sign off, Harlan override, Harlan advised. I filmed each instance like a breadcrumb. The rolling cart's TV still had a combined VCR. It wheezed but accepted a tape. I fed it assembly Harlan intro and got a warble, a ghost of tracking, and then there she was, mid-40s, principal hair, presence like a metronome in a blue dress. "We teach reading and math," she said, "and how to be good. What if how to be good could be taught like long division?" The mic on the podium popped. Parents clapped from the edges. On a poster behind her, impulse, delay, align, with cartoon arrows cheerful enough to sell toothpaste. The gym on the tape was the gym I'd just walked through, except intact. Varnish bright, banners straight. The metronome sat on the stool and flicked a silver ear to either side. Tick. My tongue found the back of my incisors on the tick and stayed there until the tock, like it had been waiting for an excuse. I blamed the rhythm for harmonizing with my breath. My jaw pulsed along the hinge with the pleasant fatigue of repetition. When Harlan said the word better, a camera panned slowly over rows of children whose smiles were arranged like choir folders. Identical, necessary. Curiosity beats rules in my personal game. I pulled the tape labeled correction and slid it in. The small room on screen had a dot painted on the wall at eye level. A boy sat with his hands flat, a collar closing the loop between his shoulders. "Eyes on dot," said a woman's voice through a ceiling speaker, the consonants softened by the room. The dial on the boy's collar clicked one step. He flinched without losing the dot. Smile. He smiled. The left corner trembled, then held like it had found a rail. "Say, I can wait." He said it. The second time his blink synchronized. The third time the words came out inside the shape the smile allowed. "Good," said the voice, and the collar's dial clicked back to 0, a little reward. When the boy stood, the chair's pine arms bore new half-moons, dark with sweat. My own molars slid into a track that felt correct. There was a clean little shelf behind the incisors that hadn't existed in any x-ray I'd ever joked about with a hygienist. I touched my jaw and felt warmth under the skin as if the bones were being sanded by invisible hands. The itch at the base of my neck had a shape now. The ghost of the collar's teeth pressing back from the inside like symmetry remembered. A cabinet in the lab off the AV room offered context I didn't want. The lab itself was a standard science classroom left to rust. Long black tables, a fume hood taped shut, faded hazard diamonds. In a sliding door cabinet, I found coils of thin silver wire, brass clasps in shallow trays, a rack of glass vials capped with corks the color of old pennies, each vial holding a clear liquid that refused to slosh. Consent forms lay in a neat manila stack, the paper brittle but legible. I filmed the language as I read it. Improvement, community standards, beneficial restraints, parental authorization. Each line sounded reasonable if you ignored the way reason can be turned into a lever. The lowest drawer stuck and then yielded a folder labeled scaling in the same narrow hand as the ledgers. Inside, memos about phase 2 and 3. Phrases like media saturation and entrainment. A rough diagram of a television with a metronome sketched where a channel number should be. Beneath that, a stick figure in front of a screen smiling while numbers ticked by. Not just a school project, a broadcast. I backed out of the lab fast enough to notice and slow enough to pretend I'd always planned to. In the hall light, I shot an insert of my fingers rubbing the irritated skin where the collar had sat. The marks were faint and symmetrical, 2 neat notches. Allergic reaction, I said to the camera, because the edit likes a rational voice to fight with. The LED cut through dust and made it sparkle. I took a breath and it hit the same count as the tape. 2 in, hold, 2 out, hold. No one told me to. I preferred it that way. Before I left, I returned to the gym for one last wide. The stool sat where it had been. The space had that tired afternoon quality, heat moving from floor to rafters with nothing to do but rise. I framed the banner, the bleachers, the center circle. Somewhere in the building, water tapped in a pipe. It sounded like a metronome because my head needed it to. Tick. I let the ambient audio roll a full minute to have options. At the edges of the shot, I could see my own silhouette as I crossed from one camera to the other. The shoulders red as squared, the jawline as a line. The smile tried to live on my face because it had learned it was welcome. I kept my mouth in neutral and let it pass. "I'll digitize what I can tonight," I said to the camera, clean for the end card. "Tomorrow, we go deeper." When I played that line back in my head on the walk out, the timbre was wrong, like I'd recorded it later in a booth and dropped it in. I chalked it up to brick acoustics and the way rooms edit you before you can edit them. Outside, the late sun flattened the kudzu to coins. I rethreaded the chain through the doors and left the broken lock the way I'd found it, useless and persuasive. The wind ran through the grass in eighth notes. In the car, I checked the camera's remaining card space, the battery levels, the angle on my own face for the drive-away shot. A fleck of brass sat where I'd nudged it earlier, toothy and soft, a nothing that wanted to be a tool. I flicked it into the door pocket and pretended I didn't watch where it fell. On the highway back, the expansion joints under the tires kept time. I didn't match my breath to them on purpose. My body made that decision without my vote and asked for my consent retroactively. As the city rose up again, I said out loud, alone in the car, "It's going to cut well," and heard in my own voice a steadiness that wasn't just confidence. It was alignment. I told myself I'd earned it, and my jaw agreed, settling into its new groove with a click that felt like a promise. Back in my apartment, the air felt rehearsed, as if the room had been practicing being itself while I was gone. I set the shoebox down, slid the SD card into the reader, and let the fans spin up. The capture window bloomed. File names populated the bin in orderly rows. I liked how clean it looked. I liked the way the hum from the PC found a level and stayed there as steady as a breath you trust. I dumped the footage. The gym's varnish looked warmer on my screen than it had under my feet. The collars caught light like jewelry. When I spoke on camera, there was a faint tick beneath the consonants, the kind of artifact you leave in because it makes the story feel haunted. I pulled the music bed down to ride under it. The tick rose to meet me, polite but insistent. Beneath the room tone was something regular enough to count. I didn't count. My lungs did, and told me after. My jaw burned like I'd been chewing a strap. In the bathroom, the mirror put me at center, shoulders level, head exactly where the frame wanted it. The lower canines had refined themselves into clean points, not knife sharp, just correct, like someone had filed them against a template. When my tongue ran along them, a metallic taste bloomed and vanished. I smiled to check muscle control, and the smile landed with a click. Engaged. It hung half a beat after I dropped it, like a fade I didn't program. Email pinged. A new subscriber with the default gray avatar, L. Harlab. A direct message arrived without offering a reply button. "If you intend to publish, please be precise." The subject line was empty. My stomach made a hollow room tone. I told myself there are always people who role play in the comments, and plenty of them pick a name that fits the narrative they want to join. I went back to the desk and opened a file at random. The audio waveform wore the gym like a watermark. Between words, there was the suggestion of a metronome, but it was smarter than a metronome. It sat where edits wanted to sit. It found the beats I hadn't cut yet and marked them for me. I told the camera, fresh pickup, clean light, that we'd be digitizing overnight and going back tomorrow, that the school's AV room was a treasure trove, that this was the kind of thing that justifies 3 years of making videos in a rental where the heater sings at 12 past the hour. At 2000, the teaser I'd scheduled last night went live. The comments arrived all at once, as if someone had opened a gate. First, "No way this is real. My grandpa went to school in Pine Bluff. Turn it up, I can't hear the ticking. The tick is making me smile, LOL, stop smiling, WTF." I added likes, replied with the eye emoji, pinned a comment about the full drop. My fingers worked smooth, quick, precise. It felt good to satisfy the machine. It felt like saying yes to a question no one had asked out loud. I should have saved the unlabeled tape for the on-location reveal. I put it in the deck anyway, because rules are suggestions when the room's with you. The plastic was pristine, liter fresh. It shouldn't have been clean, but it was. The image rolled once, then settled. I watched myself sit cross-legged on a gym floor that looked like Pine Bluffs, but younger, brighter. I was in my white t-shirt, the collar looped neat at the base of my neck. My hands rested on my knees. My smile was the kind you try to copy in a thumbnail and never quite get. "Okay," I said to me. The voice carried that new steadiness, a comfort with the sentence as it left my body. "We're going to show them how to be better." The me on the screen tilted his head at the angle I'd learned, flattering, careful, suggestive of listening. "Breathe in on tick, out on talk, hold the corners. If it hurts, it's working." I froze, scrubbed back. The date burned in the corner of the frame, November 29th, 2025. Yesterday. I had been here yesterday, not there. The gym was hours and miles away. I hit play and felt my apartment step closer to the screen. I told myself someone had faked this to mess with me. I told myself a lot in order. Then I closed out of the tape window and opened the folder where my captures saved. New files were writing themselves with my camera's naming convention, a 001_C 015_1129XX, and I hadn't hit record. The time code marched forward in a window that hadn't existed a second ago. I clicked one open. I was in my chair, the shot composed the way I would have composed it. Key light, gentle, hair light feathering the top of the ear. I looked into the lens and raised a hand in a small wave. "Hey, friends," I said, smiling. "I found something you can use at home." I didn't remember saying it. The phrasing landed easy on the mouth, no hard stops to snag. I reached to hit stop and found my finger hovering obediently over the key, waiting to be told. A warm pressure at the base of my skull suggested that stopping would undo something I'd already paid for. My neck itched where the collar had touched me earlier. When I scratched, the skin met my nail with 2 faint notches placed perfectly for the brass teeth I'd let in for one breath. The refrigerator cycled on at 12 past the hour. In the audio bed of the unlabeled tape, the same hum came up at the same second. My comments filled with the word tick, spelled in different ways, all of them perfect. because now I knew how to spell it with a pause. Ick. I opened the scaling photo I'd shot in the lab and dropped it into the timeline as a corner overlay, a tasteful Easter egg. I cropped out the line about broadcast because it was ugly and made people feel managed. I said a lower third, Dr. Lucinda Harlan, superintendent. Even though the tape never said it plain, I adjusted my mic gain 2 clicks down. The ticking got louder because I'd made room for it. A file named final_tape.mp4 appeared without my help. When I clicked it, I saw myself again, framed from the sternum up. The apartment was dimmer, not dark. I had the box cutter in my right hand, the yellow one from the drawer with the batteries and the charger cables. I held it like a tool, not a threat. My smile belonged to a person who has learned how to do exactly one thing right and will do it the rest of his life. Sometimes hardware needs a notch to seat correctly, I said, calm, patient, teacher voice. I raised the blade. The camera didn't flinch. The metronome lived in the room without existing. I could have called someone. I could have gone to the hallway and pulled a fire alarm that didn't exist in a building this old, but I thought about the boy with the half moons and the chair arms and the way his mouth learned its new shape. I thought about the gym stool with no metronome on it and how I had still kept time. I thought about being useful. The comments on the teaser flared and scrolled and glowed. I can't stop in lowercase. Hurts good. Say it again. I typed, I can wait, and the phrase slipped through my fingers like it had been living there all day. My hand put the box cutter on the desk and slid it a measured inch out of frame. The notches at my neck pulsed once, twice, asking. I smiled into the lens because that's what you do when you're about to ask people to trust you. I lifted the metronome I didn't own and set it next to the mic. The arm began to swing. Tick, tock. The sound took the shape of the room. Repeat after me, I said, and my eyes watered, and my face did not change. I can wait. I thought of the line I'd used in the car, let's go find a better self, and how it had felt like a slogan when I said it, and how now it felt like instructions. I scheduled the full video for 2000, good engagement Sunday night, and watched the progress bar nose forward. 92%, 98, 100. The thumbnail I'd designed looked neat in the grid, the way a bruise looks neat under makeup. I dragged final tape.mp4 into the timeline and placed it where it belonged, at the end. I gave it a clean cut and a 1-frame pop of black for punctuation, a blink your brain would register without noticing. I hovered over export and felt the room breathe in with me for 2 counts and out for 2 counts, and I went with it because fighting would be worse and might not even be possible anymore. Placebo, I whispered, for me, for the kind of viewer who screenshotted my captions and circled where my voice cracked. Then I stood, and the chair eased back a measured inch, and the camera watched the place I'd been with patient interest. I stepped out of the frame to the right because the last tape didn't have to show everything. The metronome kept time. The upload went live. The comments sprinted in, then marched, then matched. In the space I'd just vacated, the air settled like water over a stone. The room learned the tick enough to sing along. On my monitor, in the tiny reflection in the black border of the screen, my smile held the way a smile holds in a school portrait you didn't want to remember, and then it held longer, and then it was the only thing left of me that mattered.